I noticed it the moment I sat down. Not the empty chair. Not the silence. The words. Printed neatly on a small folded card in front of me. In elegant cursive, as if someone had taken time to make it look tasteful. Temporary resident. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I smiled. And took my seat. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reaches, because I never thought mine would go beyond that table. It had been exactly 1 week since my husband died. 7 days since I buried Noel. 32 years of marriage, reduced to a quiet house and a name printed on a piece of cardstock. Temporary. Dinner that night was supposed to be simple. Just the 3 of us. My son Wade, his wife, Romy, and me. The dining room looked the same. The same mahogany table Noel insisted on buying 20 years ago. The same chandelier casting soft, golden light across polished wood. The same walls lined with photographs, birthdays, Christmas mornings, school graduations. Proof that a life had happened here. That I had belonged here. But something felt rearranged. Not physically. Something else. Noel's chair was still there. No one had moved it. But no one looked at it either. I did. Without meaning to. Over and over again. As if he might still be there, hands folded. Smiling quietly, ready to soften whatever tension sat at the table. Pass the potatoes. Romy's voice cut through the room. Sharp. Clean. Like she had already decided how the evening would go. I reached for the bowl. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Grief had been sitting in my chest all week like a stone, but tonight. It felt different. Quieter. Colder. Wade sat across from me. Not beside me. Not where he used to sit when he was younger. Close enough to reach for my hand when he needed comfort. Across. Like distance had been measured. And chosen. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention his father. Didn't acknowledge the fact that the man who raised him had been buried just days ago. Instead, he focused on his plate. Or on Romy. Mostly Romy. The service was beautiful, I said. My voice sounded softer than I expected. Your father would have liked it. Romy set her fork down. Gently. But deliberately. Yes, she said. Then she glanced at Wade. And something passed between them. Something quiet. Something rehearsed. That's actually what we wanted to talk to you about. There it was. I folded my napkin slowly. Placed it beside my plate. Gave them my full attention. What is it? I asked. Romy straightened slightly. Not nervous. Prepared. Now that Noel is gone. She began. This house is going to be too much for you. I looked at her. Not surprised. Not yet. I've been managing this house for over 30 years, I said. She smiled. That same small, controlled smile. Yes, she said, exactly. Wade shifted in his chair. Still not looking at me. We've been thinking, he added, about what's best moving forward. Best. For who? I asked. Neither of them answered immediately. Instead, Romy leaned forward slightly. We think you'd be happier somewhere smaller, she said, more appropriate, less to maintain, less responsibility. I glanced down at the card again. Temporary resident. I'm not helpless, I said. No one said you were, she replied quickly. Too quickly. But this house, I began. Is a lot. Wade cut in. I stopped. Looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment, I didn't recognize him. This is your home too, I said carefully. You grew up here. He nodded. But there was no warmth in it. Yeah, he said, and now it makes sense for it to evolve. Evolve. Romy exhaled softly, like she had been waiting for that word. We've been talking about expanding our family, she said, and this house has a lot of potential. There it was. Not concern. Not care. Potential. For them. I sat back in my chair. Slowly. And where exactly do you see me in that plan? I asked. Silence. Then Romy spoke. And this time, she didn't bother softening it. Now that your husband is dead, she said, you should take some time. Grieve, pack your things, and move on. The room went still. No raised voices. No dramatic gestures. Just a sentence. Placed carefully. Like that card. I turned to Wade. He didn't hesitate this time. She's right, Mom. Just like that. This house was Dad's, he continued, and now it's mine. You were just staying here. Just staying. I let the words settle. Didn't rush them away. Didn't fight them. 32 years. Just staying. I see, I said. And I meant it. Because in that moment, everything became very clear. I stood up. My chair didn't scrape. My hands didn't shake. I'll need a little time, I said. 2 weeks, Romy replied immediately. Of course. That should be more than enough, she added. Wade finally looked at me. And what I saw wasn't anger. Wasn't guilt. It was nothing. It's for the best, he said. I nodded once. Then I walked upstairs. The bedroom door closed behind me with a quiet click. The room still smelled like Noel. His watch was on the dresser. His glasses on the nightstand. The book he never finished still open, face down, as if he might come back and pick it up again. I sat on the edge of the bed. For 7 days, I had felt grief. Heavy, constant, suffocating. But now, I felt something else. Something sharper. Clearer. I looked around the room one last time. At the life we built. At everything they thought I would leave behind. Then I stood up. Walked to the closet. And reached for my coat. The next morning, I went to the bank. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I didn't bring much with me. Just my old handbag, and a decision I hadn't fully named yet. On the way there, I noticed something strange. The city looked exactly the same. People were heading to work. Traffic moved like it always did. The little cafe on the corner was open. The smell of fresh bread drifting into the street. Nothing had changed. Except me. I had always imagined the days after losing my husband would feel heavy. Slow. Filled with tears. But it wasn't like that. It was clearer. Every small detail stood out. Like someone had turned the sharpness of my life all the way up. I thought about the night before. Not the words Romy said. Not Wade nodding beside her. The smaller things. The way she placed that card in front of me. The way she avoided looking at me. The way Wade never met my eyes. It had all been too smooth. Not something decided in a single evening. Something planned. I stepped into the bank. Bright lights, clean floors, cool air. The quiet hum of a place where everything was structured. Predictable. Unlike my home. Good morning, ma'am, how can I help you? The young teller smiled. I smiled back. I'd like to review some documents, I said. My voice steady. Even. Like it was just another errand. While I waited, I sat near the window. Sunlight fell across my hands. The lines in my skin looked thinner in the light. But deeper. I had spent my entire life building a family. Not just a house. Meals. Holidays. Late nights sitting beside Wade when he was sick. Waiting for Noel to come home. Keeping dinner warm. I never imagined leaving. Not because I couldn't. But because I never thought I would have to. A woman nearby was on the phone. Her voice soft, warm. She mentioned her grandchildren. She laughed quietly. I listened. And realized. It had been a long time since Wade called me just to talk. No reason. No small updates. No simple questions like he used to ask. Everything between us had become functional. Short. Polite. And I hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had. And chose not to look too closely. Mrs. Myrtle? I looked up. A man in a dark suit was walking toward me. Older. Familiar. Mr. Harris, I said. He had worked with Noel for years. Handled our financial matters. Someone my husband trusted completely. I didn't expect to see you here, he said. His voice calm, measured. Neither did I replied. He studied me for a moment. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't offer sympathy. Just nodded. As if he understood, without needing details. You're here to review your records? He asked. Yes. He paused. Then said quietly. There are a few things you might want to look at carefully. I looked at him. What do you mean? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just exhaled slowly. Your husband, he said, was a very careful man. I stayed silent. I believe he prepared for more possibilities than you realize. That didn't surprise me. But something inside me shifted. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was something else. The beginning of a question. The teller called my name. I stood. Adjusted my coat. Thank you, I said to Harris. He nodded. Don't be too quick to believe what others tell you, he added. Especially when it involves what belongs to you. I followed the teller inside. The glass door closed quietly behind me. And for the first time since the night before, I stopped thinking about leaving that house. I started thinking about something else. The truth. I sat down at the desk. The teller placed a thin folder in front of me. These are the accounts under your name, she said. I nodded. Opened it. Numbers. Names. Signatures. Everything looked familiar. And yet, something wasn't right. I turned each page slowly. No rush. Noel always included me in these things. He never kept anything from me. We weren't the kind of couple who talked about money every day. But we understood it. And we trusted each other. That mattered. Is there something wrong, ma'am? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Could you show me any recent changes? I asked. She nodded. Typed something into her computer. Then turned the screen toward me. Starting about 3 months ago, she said. 3 months. I looked closer. Some accounts had been adjusted. Not drastically. Not obvious. But enough to feel like someone had touched them. I don't remember authorizing these changes, I said. She checked again. They were all properly verified, she said, with a signature. A signature. I looked down at the page. My name. Written in familiar strokes. But I knew. It wasn't mine. Not completely. Small differences. Subtle. A line drawn a little longer than usual. A curve slightly off. Easy to miss. Unless you knew it well. And I did. What were these changes for? I asked. Mostly access permissions, she said, additional authorized users. I stayed quiet. Who was added? I asked. She glanced at the screen. Hesitated for a second. Wade Harrison. I didn't react. And one more, she added. I didn't ask. Just looked. Romy Harrison. I nodded slightly. Of course. When were they added? I asked. About 2 months ago. 2 months. Before Noel passed. I sat still. No anger. No sadness. Just pieces beginning to fit. I remembered. 2 months ago, Noel had started getting weaker. Sleeping more. Talking less. Romy had been visiting more often. Offering help. Taking over small tasks. Let me handle the paperwork, she had said. I thought it was kindness. Wade had been around more too. Talking about the future. About arrangements. I didn't question it. Because at the time, I was focused on my husband. Can I see the authorization documents? I asked. She printed them. Placed them in front of me. I picked them up. Everything looked official. Valid. My name. My signature. But not signed by me. Where were these notarized? I asked. She checked. At a private office, she said. I nodded. We had never used that office. Not once. Noel always worked with the same person. For years. Always the same. Until suddenly. It wasn't. Would you like to make any changes? She asked gently. I set the papers down. Looked at the glass window ahead. Sunlight still falling the same way. Everything outside still normal. Only one thing had changed. Trust. Not yet, I said. My voice steady. Not yet. She nodded. I gathered the papers carefully. No shaking. No urgency. Just more awareness. As I stood up, something came to mind. Any large transactions recently? I asked. She checked quickly. Nothing unusual, she said. Everything looks stable. Stable. I smiled faintly. Thank you, I said. I stepped away. Walked toward the exit. Mr. Harris was still near the door. He looked at me. Didn't ask. I stopped. They've been added to my accounts, I said. He nodded. Like he already knew. And the signature? I continued. He didn't need me to finish. I understand, he said. A brief silence. What are you going to do? He asked. I looked outside. People still moving. Cars still passing. Life still continuing. Nothing yet, I said. Then I looked back at him. But I think they started this long before I realized. He nodded slowly. Then don't let them finish it, he said. I didn't respond. Just nodded. And walked out. The morning air touched my face. Cool. Clear. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being pushed out of that house anymore. I realized I had been pushed out of my own life. A long time ago. I had been pushed out of my own life. Long before that dinner. I didn't realize it all at once. It didn't come like a shock. It came back in pieces. Small moments. Things I had dismissed. Things I had explained away. Now, they felt different. I started walking. Slowly. No destination in mind. And as I walked, I began to remember. Not the big events. Not the obvious ones. The quiet ones. The kind you don't question. Because you trust the people involved. A Sunday afternoon. About 6 months ago. Romy stood in my kitchen. Rearranging things. Not cleaning. Not helping. Rearranging. This makes more sense, she had said, moving my spice rack without asking. Everything should be easier to reach. I had smiled. Nodded. Let her do it. It was just a small thing. At least, that's what I told myself. Then there was the hallway closet. One day, I opened it. And my things were gone. Not missing. Just moved. Folded differently. Placed on a higher shelf. Wade needed space, Romy had said. His work equipment. I didn't argue. It was his house too. That's what I believed. Or maybe. That's what I was being taught to believe. I kept walking. Another memory surfaced. A phone call. Wade, speaking quickly. Distracted. Mom, if Romy reaches out about any paperwork, just sign it, okay? It's nothing important. Nothing important. I had laughed softly. Of course. I trusted him. I always had. There was never a reason not to. Until now. I stopped at a crosswalk. Waited for the light. A couple stood beside me. Holding hands. Talking about something trivial. I looked away. And remembered Noel. He never made decisions without telling me. Even the smallest ones. Just in case, he used to say. I want you to know everything. Not because he had to. Because he respected me. That was the difference. The light turned green. I crossed the street. Another memory. 3 months ago. Romy sitting beside Noel. Her voice soft. Gentle. Let me help with the paperwork, she said. You should be resting. Noel had looked at me. Just for a second. Like he was about to say something. But then he nodded. All right, he said. I had thought it was kindness. Now, I wasn't so sure. Because after that, things changed faster. Mail started arriving less often. Statements I used to see every month stopped appearing. Everything's digital now, Romy had explained. It's more convenient. Convenient. For who? I kept walking. The pieces kept coming. Wade changing the subject whenever I asked about finances. Romy answering questions that weren't directed at her. Doors being closed during conversations that used to happen openly. And me. Standing just outside of them. Still inside the house. But no longer inside the decisions. I slowed down. Because now. The pattern was clear. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't grief. It wasn't stress. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was gradual. Careful. Layer by layer. Until one day. I was sitting at my own table. Reading a card that told me I didn't belong. I stopped walking. Stood still for a moment. And for the first time. I didn't ask myself why they did it. I asked something else. When did I let it start? The answer came quietly. Not in words. But in a feeling. The moment I chose comfort over clarity. The moment I told myself. It's nothing. Over and over again. Until it became something. I exhaled slowly. The air felt different now. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just clear. I reached into my bag. Pulled out the folder from the bank. Ran my fingers along the edge. They had planned this. For months. Maybe longer. But they had made one mistake. They thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse. That I wouldn't do anything. I looked ahead. And for the first time since Noel passed. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what was still mine. And what I was about to take back. I didn't rush into it. I've lived long enough to know. The moment you act too quickly is the moment you lose control. So instead of going home, I turned around and walked back into the bank. Mr. Harris was still there. Standing near the same spot. Like he hadn't moved at all. He looked at me. And this time, I didn't wait for him to speak first. Did Noel know? I asked. No greeting. No explanation. Just the question. He held my gaze for a moment. Then nodded. Yes, he said. Not hesitation. Not uncertainty. Just confirmation. I let that sit for a second. So he knew they were involved? I asked. Another pause. Not everything, Harris replied. But enough. Enough. I exhaled slowly. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. This time, Harris didn't answer right away. He looked down briefly. Then back at me. Because he was trying to protect you, he said. Protect me. I almost smiled. From what? Your husband started noticing changes, Harris continued. Small things at first. Of course he did. Noel noticed everything. Access requests, document movements, unusual urgency around certain files. I didn't interrupt. He didn't accuse anyone, Harris said. That wasn't his way. No. It wasn't. He just adjusted things. Adjusted. I looked at him. What kind of things? I asked. Harris reached into his briefcase. Pulled out a sealed envelope. He held it for a moment. Like he was deciding something. Then handed it to me. Noel asked me to keep this, he said. In case it ever became necessary. Necessary. I took the envelope. It wasn't heavy. But it felt like it carried weight. What is it? I asked. Something he changed, Harris said, quietly. I looked down at it. My name was written on the front. In Noel's handwriting. Steady. Familiar. I traced it lightly with my finger. He didn't want to alarm you, Harris continued. He hoped it wouldn't come to this. But it had. I opened the envelope. Inside. Several documents. Official. Stamped. Signed. I scanned the first page. And then the second. And something inside me went completely still. The house was not in Wade's name. It never had been. It had been placed into a trust. Months ago. With one condition attached. I read it again. Carefully. In clear, formal language. Any attempt to remove me from the property, without my written consent, would immediately void all transfer rights. I didn't react. Didn't look up. Just kept reading. There was more. Access to financial accounts? Restricted. Conditional. Temporary authorizations? Revocable. At any time. Without notice. I closed the folder slowly. They don't know, I said. It wasn't a question. Harris shook his head. No, he said, they don't. Of course they didn't. Because if they had, they wouldn't have been so confident last night. They wouldn't have given me 2 weeks. They wouldn't have looked at me like I had already lost. I held the envelope in my hands. For the first time since Noel passed, I felt something different. Not grief. Not anger. Control. They think the house is theirs, I said. Yes, Harris replied. And they think I'll leave quietly. He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. Because we both knew. I folded the documents back into the envelope. Carefully. Not like something fragile. Like something important. What should I do? I asked. Harris looked at me. Really looked at me this time. Then said. That depends. On what? I asked. On whether you want to leave. He said slowly. Or whether you want them to understand what they've done. I held his gaze. For a moment, I thought about last night. The card. The silence. The way my son couldn't even look at me. And the way she spoke. Like I was already gone. I don't need them to understand, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. I just need them to stop. Harris nodded. Then don't tell them yet, he said. Of course. Let them continue, he added. Let them believe everything is going according to their plan. I almost smiled. Because it was. Just not the way they thought. I slipped the envelope into my bag. Thank you, I said. Harris gave a small nod. Noel trusted you to handle this, he said. I didn't respond. But I understood. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the house. It was about something else. Something they had already taken from me. Without realizing it. Respect. I turned and walked toward the exit. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. Not away from my home. But back to it. And I wasn't going back as someone being asked to leave. I was going back. As someone who had just been given the truth. I was thinking about what was still mine. And what I was about to take back. I went back home that afternoon. Not slowly. Not hesitantly. Just normally. Like someone returning from an ordinary errand. The house looked the same. From the outside, nothing had changed. The curtains were still drawn halfway. The mailbox still slightly open. The front door exactly where I had left it. But I knew better now. I stepped inside. Voices. From the kitchen. Low. Casual. I paused for a second. Not to listen. Just to register. Then I walked in. Romy was at the counter. Wade beside her. They both turned. For a moment. Just a moment. Something passed across their faces. Not surprise. Calculation. You're back early, Romy said. Her voice light. Carefully neutral. I had a few things to take care of, I replied. I set my bag down. Same place as always. Nothing dramatic. Nothing different. Wade watched me. Not directly. But enough. Everything okay? He asked. It sounded right. Concerned. Polite. Practiced. Yes, I said. And that was all. I moved past them. Opened the cabinet. Took out a glass. The same one I always used. Filled it with water. Routine. Familiar. Normal. Behind me, I could feel it. The shift. They were waiting. For something. A reaction. A question. A sign. I gave them nothing. I turned around. Do you want me to start dinner? I asked. Romy blinked. Just once. No, that's okay, she said quickly. We already ate. Of course they had. Without me. Again. That's fine, I said. I sat down at the table. The same table. The card was gone. But I remembered exactly where it had been. Temporary resident. I rested my hands lightly on the surface. Calm. Still. So, I said, 2 weeks. Wade shifted slightly. Yeah, he said, we just think it's the best timeline. Best. For everyone, Romy added. Of course. I nodded. That makes sense, I said. And I meant it. Just not the way they thought. I'll start organizing things tomorrow, I continued. Another look passed between them. Relief. Small. But visible. They thought it was over. That I had accepted it. That I would leave quietly. Just like they planned. Let us know if you need help, Wade said. I almost smiled. I will, I replied. But I wouldn't. I stood up. Picked up my bag. I'm going to rest for a bit, I said. No one stopped me. No one asked anything else. Why would they? As far as they knew. They had already won. Upstairs, the bedroom felt the same. Noelle's things still in place. Unmoved. Untouched. Unlike everything else in the house. I closed the door behind me. Sat on the edge of the bed. Then opened my bag. Took out the envelope. Set it on my lap. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just looked at it. Because this was the difference. Yesterday, I had been reacting. Today, I was deciding. I opened it again. Read through the document slowly. Not to understand. I already did. But to remember. Every line. Every condition. Every protection Noelle had put in place. He had seen it. Before I did. And instead of confronting it, he prepared. Quietly. Carefully. Just like I was about to. I closed the folder. Then I did something simple. I took out my phone. And turned it off. No distractions. No interruptions. Just silence. The kind that lets you think clearly. I lay back on the bed. Stared at the ceiling. And began to plan. Not how to fight them. Not how to expose them. But how to let them continue. Because people reveal more. When they believe no one is watching. And right now. They believed I was already gone. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. But to hold the moment. Because I knew. Everything after this. Would not be the same. Downstairs, I could hear faint movement. Their voices. Light. Relaxed. Unbothered. They were already living in the version of the future. Where I didn't exist. I opened my eyes. And for the first time. That didn't hurt. Because now. I knew something they didn't. This wasn't their house. And I wasn't leaving. Not yet. That was the only thing I needed to remind myself. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Still. For a moment, it almost felt like before. Before the conversations. Before the silence. Before everything shifted. I got out of bed. Made it neatly. The way I always had. Routine mattered. It kept things believable. Downstairs, the kitchen was empty. I made coffee. 2 cups. Not because I needed to. Because I always did. When Wade came down, he paused. Just slightly. He noticed. Morning, he said. Good morning, I replied. I placed the second cup on the table. Same spot as always. He hesitated. Then sat down. Thanks, he said. I nodded. No tension. No questions. Just normal. Romy came in a few minutes later. She looked between us. At the coffee. At the table. Something in her expression tightened. Then disappeared. You're up early, she said. I have things to organize, I replied. That word again. Organize. It seemed to satisfy her. Good. Because it was exactly what she wanted to hear. I can help you go through some of your things later, she offered. Of course she could. I looked at her. Calm. Polite. That would be nice, I said. Wade glanced at her. Another one of those looks. Short. Quiet. But full of meaning. They were already thinking ahead. Deciding what stayed. What went. What became theirs. I sipped my coffee. And the paperwork? I asked. Casually. Romy didn't miss a beat. "We'll take care of that," she said. "You don't need to worry about any of it." "Of course." I nodded. "That's a relief," I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't worried anymore. I was watching. The rest of the morning moved slowly. I opened closets. Sorted through drawers. Folded things. Not packing. Just moving. Letting them see what they expected to see. Letting them believe the process had started. Romy stayed close. Too close. Every time I picked something up. She watched. Every time I set something aside. She noticed. "Are you taking that with you?" she asked at one point. I looked at the object in my hand. A small framed photo. Wade, maybe 5 years old. Sitting on Noelle's shoulders. Both of them laughing. "Yes," I said. "Of course I was." She nodded. But her eyes lingered. Measuring. Not the memory. The space it would leave behind. Later, I moved into the hallway. The closet door was slightly open. I stepped closer. Inside. My things were still where she had moved them. Higher shelf. Less accessible. I reached up. Took down a box. Romy appeared behind me. "I already organized that," she said. Her tone still light. Still controlled. "I know," I replied. I set the box down. Opened it. Inside. Old documents. Bills. Letters. Nothing important. At least. That's what it looked like. "You don't need to go through everything," she added. "We can handle that." "We." I almost smiled. "I'd prefer to look myself," I said. She didn't argue. But she didn't leave either. She stood there. Watching. Making sure. That I didn't find anything I wasn't supposed to. But she was too late for that. I had already found what mattered. And more importantly, I knew what they didn't. That afternoon, Wade came into the living room. He held a piece of paper. I started looking into some places, he said. Of course he had. He handed it to me. Senior living communities. Clean. Polished. Temporary. Just like the card. I took it. Looked at it. "Thank you," I said. He seemed relieved. "They're really nice," he added. "You'd have people your age around. Activities. Support." Support. I nodded. "I'm sure they are," I said. I set the paper down. Not rejecting it. Not accepting it. Just placing it. Exactly where it belonged. Between us. A quiet line. That neither of us crossed. That evening, dinner was quieter. No confrontation. No tension. Just the absence of something that used to be there. I noticed something else. They weren't careful anymore. Not with their conversations. Not with their timing. They spoke more freely. Assumed more. At one point, Romy said, "We'll need to repaint this room." Not if. When. Wade nodded. "Yeah," he said, "make it more modern." I sat at the table. Listening. Not reacting. Because this was what I needed. Not their words. Their certainty. The belief that everything was already theirs. That I was already gone. I finished my meal. Set my fork down. Calm. "Good night," I said. And went upstairs. Behind me, their voices continued. Lighter. Freer. Unaware. I closed the bedroom door. Sat down. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I was waiting. I felt like I was letting something unfold. Exactly the way it needed to. Because the more comfortable they became, the more they revealed. And I wasn't done watching. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was upset. Not because I was afraid. But because I was thinking. Not about what they said. Not about what they planned. But about what they had already done. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels occupied. Around midnight, I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew this house. Every step. Every corner. I walked into the hallway. Paused. Listened. Nothing. Then I kept going. Downstairs. The kitchen was empty. Clean. Not the way I used to leave it. Different. Controlled. I moved past it. Toward the study. Noelle's study. The door was closed. That alone was enough to stop me. Noelle never closed that door. Not to me. I stood there for a moment. Then reached for the handle. It didn't turn. Locked. I looked at it. Calm. Not surprised. Just confirmed. I stepped back. Then went to the drawer in the hallway. Second one from the top. Where Noelle used to keep the spare keys. I opened it. Empty. Of course. I closed it slowly. Then walked to the kitchen. There was a small cabinet above the sink. Most people wouldn't think to look there. But I did. Because I had watched Noelle hide things there before. Not secrets. Just backups. I reached up. Opened it. And there it was. A small metal key. Cold in my hand. I went back to the study. Inserted it into the lock. Turned. The door opened. The room smelled the same. Paper. Wood. A trace of Noelle's cologne. But something else was different. The desk. Drawers slightly open. Files moved. Not messy. Just handled. I stepped inside. Closed the door behind me. Slowly. Carefully. I walked to the desk. Ran my fingers along the surface. Then opened the top drawer. Inside. Folders. Documents. Some familiar. Some not. I pulled one out. Property records. I flipped through it. Pages missing. Not random ones. Specific ones. The ones that mattered. I set it down. Reached for another folder. Bank correspondence. Also incomplete. Sections removed. Cleanly. Deliberately. I didn't react. Didn't rush. Just kept going. Drawer after drawer. Each one telling the same story. Not theft. Not chaos. Selection. Someone had been here. More than once. And they knew exactly what they were looking for. I stopped. Stood still in the middle of the room. And let the silence settle. Because now. I wasn't guessing anymore. They weren't preparing. They had already started. I walked to the bookshelf. There was a small box on the second shelf. Locked. I knew that box. Noelle kept personal documents there. Things he didn't need often. But would never misplace. I reached for it. It was still there. Untouched. I checked the lock. Still sealed. Good. I placed it back. Exactly where it had been. Then turned back to the desk. And did something simple. I took one of the folders they had gone through. And moved it. Just slightly. Not enough for them to notice immediately. But enough. To know. If they came back. I closed the drawer. Looked around the room one last time. Then turned off the desk lamp. And walked out. Locking the door behind me. The key stayed in my hand. As I walked back upstairs, I understood something clearly. They didn't just want me out. They wanted control. Of the house. Of the documents. Of the narrative. They were rewriting things. Quietly. Carefully. Just like I was. I reached my room. Closed the door. Sat down on the bed. The key still in my hand. I looked at it. Small. Simple. But now. It meant something else. Access. Not just to a room. But to the truth they thought they had already hidden. I placed it inside my drawer. Not locked. Not hidden. Just kept. Because I didn't need to protect it. Not anymore. I lay down. The house was quiet again. But it didn't feel the same. Not empty. Not heavy. Just exposed. I closed my eyes. And for the first time. I wasn't waiting for them to make a move. I knew they would. And next time. I would be ready. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was upset. Not because I was afraid. But because I was thinking. Not about what they said. Not about what they planned. But about what they had already done. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels occupied. Around midnight, I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew this house. Every step. Every corner. I walked into the hallway. Paused. Listened. Nothing. Then I kept going. Downstairs. The kitchen was empty. Clean. Not the way I used to leave it. Different. Controlled. I moved past it. Toward the study. Noelle's study. The door was closed. That alone was enough to stop me. Noelle never closed that door. Not to me. I stood there for a moment. Then reached for the handle. It didn't turn. Locked. I looked at it. Calm. Not surprised. Just confirmed. I stepped back. Then went to the drawer in the hallway. Second one from the top. Where Noelle used to keep the spare keys. I opened it. Empty. Of course. I closed it slowly. Then walked to the kitchen. There was a small cabinet above the sink. Most people wouldn't think to look there. But I did. Because I had watched Noelle hide things there before. Not secrets. Just backups. I reached up. Opened it. And there it was. A small metal key. Cold in my hand. I went back to the study. Inserted it into the lock. Turned. The door opened. The room smelled the same. Paper. Wood. A trace of Noelle's cologne. But something else was different. The desk. Drawers slightly open. Files moved. Not messy. Just handled. I stepped inside. Closed the door behind me. Slowly. Carefully. I walked to the desk. Ran my fingers along the surface. Then opened the top drawer. Inside. Folders. Documents. Some familiar. Some not. I pulled one out. Property records. I flipped through it. Pages missing. Not random ones. Specific ones. The ones that mattered. I set it down. Reached for another folder. Bank correspondence. Also incomplete. Sections removed. Cleanly. Deliberately. I didn't react. Didn't rush. Just kept going. Drawer after drawer. Each one telling the same story. Not theft. Not chaos. Selection. Someone had been here. More than once. And they knew exactly what they were looking for. I stopped. Stood still in the middle of the room. And let the silence settle. Because now. I wasn't guessing anymore. They weren't preparing. They had already started. I walked to the bookshelf. There was a small box on the second shelf. Locked. I knew that box. Noelle kept personal documents there. Things he didn't need often. But would never misplace. I reached for it. It was still there. Untouched. I checked the lock. Still sealed. Good. I placed it back. Exactly where it had been. Then turned back to the desk. And did something simple. I took one of the folders they had gone through. And moved it. Just slightly. Not enough for them to notice immediately. But enough. To know. If they came back. I closed the drawer. Looked around the room one last time. Then turned off the desk lamp. And walked out. Locking the door behind me. The key stayed in my hand. As I walked back upstairs, I understood something clearly. They didn't just want me out. They wanted control. Of the house. Of the documents. Of the narrative. They were rewriting things. Quietly. Carefully. Just like I was. I reached my room. Closed the door. Sat down on the bed. The key still in my hand. I looked at it. Small. Simple. But now. It meant something else. Access. Not just to a room. But to the truth they thought they had already hidden. I placed it inside my drawer. Not locked. Not hidden. Just kept. Because I didn't need to protect it. Not anymore. I lay down. The house was quiet again. But it didn't feel the same. Not empty. Not heavy. Just exposed. I closed my eyes. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to make a move. I knew they would. And next time, I would be ready. Not yet. I didn't have to wait long. The next night, I stayed awake again. Not in bed this time. I sat in the chair by the window. Lights off. Curtains slightly open. From there, I could see the hallway. Not clearly, but enough. Time moved slowly. The house settled into its usual rhythm. Doors closed. Water running. Soft footsteps. Then silence. Around midnight, I heard it. A door. Not loud. Not forced. Careful. I didn't move. Just listened. Another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Not someone wandering. Someone going somewhere specific. I stood up. Quietly. Opened my door just enough. The hallway was dim. But I could see movement. A shadow. Near the stairs. Then turning. Toward the study. Of course. I waited. Counted a few seconds. Then stepped out. No sound. No hesitation. I moved down the hallway. Stopped just before the corner. And listened again. A soft click. The study door. Opening. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. I stepped back. Gave it time. Because this wasn't the moment to confront. This was the moment to confirm. A minute passed. Maybe two. Then I moved. Down the stairs. Each step placed carefully. When I reached the bottom, the study door was slightly open. A thin line of light spilled into the hallway. I walked closer. Slow. And stopped just before the door. I could hear them. Two voices. Low. Romy. And Wade. She said she's starting to pack tomorrow. Wade whispered. Good. Romy replied. The sooner she's out, the easier this will be. Easier. For everything. Wade added. A pause. Then. Did you find the rest of it? Romy asked. Not yet. Wade said. Some of the files are missing. Missing. I almost smiled. They have to be here. She said. He wouldn't have moved everything. No. He didn't. You checked the top drawer? She asked. Yes. The second cabinet? Yes. Another pause. Then her voice. Sharper now. Then look again. I stood there. Not breathing louder. Not shifting. Just listening. Because now. There was no doubt. This wasn't about helping me move. This wasn't about concern. This was about searching. About finding something. Something they believed belonged to them. Or soon would. I stepped back. Quietly. Walked toward the kitchen. Not away. Just repositioning. I turned on the light. Not bright. Just enough. Then I opened the fridge. Let the door stay open. A normal sound. A normal action. Footsteps. Quick this time. From the study. Then silence. Then. The light in the hallway shifted. I closed the fridge. Turned slightly. And there they were. Standing at the edge of the kitchen. Wade first. Romy just behind him. What are you doing up? Wade asked. His voice was steady. Too steady. I was thirsty, I said. Simple. Believable. I reached for a glass. Filled it. Drank. No rush. No tension. Behind me, I could feel it again. That same calculation. Rebuilding the moment. Adjusting. You should get some rest, Romy said. Her tone softer now. Careful again. I will, I replied. I turned toward them. Looked at Wade. Just for a second longer than usual. Then smiled. A small one. The kind that doesn't ask questions. The kind that ends them. Good night, I said. And walked past them. Back upstairs. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because now. I knew exactly what they were doing. And more importantly, I knew what they were looking for. Back in my room, I closed the door. Sat down. And let the silence return. Different this time. Not uncertain. Not heavy. Certain. They had taken the bait. Not because I said it, but because they believed there was nothing left to hide. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and replayed every word, every detail, every hesitation in their voices. They were close, but not close enough. And that was exactly where I needed them to be. I opened my eyes, looked toward the drawer, where the key was, where the documents were. Safe. Untouched. Unfound. I stood up, walked to the mirror, looked at myself. The same face. The same woman. But not the same position. Not anymore. They thought I was leaving. They thought I was already gone. They thought the house was theirs. I turned off the light. Lay down. And for the first time since all of this began, I slept. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't just be watching anymore. Not yet. But soon. The next morning, everything felt quieter. Not because the house had changed, but because I had. I got up at the usual time. Made the bed. Went downstairs. Routine. Consistency mattered. It made people comfortable. And comfortable people talk more than they should. Romy was already in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. Coffee beside her. She looked up when I walked in. Morning, she said. Good morning, I replied. Same tone. Same pace. No difference. Wade came in a few minutes later. He glanced between us, measuring something. Still unsure. Good. I poured myself coffee. Sat down. Took a sip. Then said, I was thinking about what you said yesterday. Both of them looked at me. Still. Attentive. Careful. About moving, I added. Romy nodded slightly. Yes, she said, we just want what's best for you. Of course she did. I nodded. I understand, I said. And I let the silence sit for a moment. Then. I think it would help if we went through everything together. Wade blinked. Everything? He asked. Yes, I said. Calm. Documents. The house. Accounts. Just so I know what I'm leaving behind. There it was. Not confrontation. But pressure. Soft. Controlled. Romy's expression didn't change. But her hand tightened slightly around her cup. We can handle that, she said. You don't need to worry about those details. I looked at her. Not challenging. Just steady. I know, I said. Then added. But I'd feel better if I saw it myself. Wade shifted in his seat. It's all standard stuff, Mom, he said. Nothing complicated. Of course it wasn't. That's what they wanted me to believe. I'm sure it is, I replied. Then I took another sip of coffee. Unhurried. But it's still my life, I said quietly. That landed. Not loudly. But clearly. Another pause. Then Romy smiled. Soft. Controlled. Of course, she said, we can go through things later. Later. I nodded. That works. Because it did. I wasn't in a hurry. They were. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Normal on the surface. But underneath. Something had shifted. They were more careful now. More aware. Not of what I knew, but of what I might ask next. That afternoon, Wade approached me. He held another set of papers. Just some preliminary stuff, he said. Of course it was. I took them. Looked through the pages. Property estimates. Transfer timelines. Nothing official. Just preparation. I nodded. This is helpful, I said. And meant it. Because now I could see how far they had already gone. This place has a lot of value, Wade added. I looked up. Yes, I said. It does. He hesitated. Then nodded. Like he wasn't sure what to say next. Good. Because uncertainty was something they hadn't planned for. Later that evening, I walked past the study. The door was closed again. Locked. But this time, I didn't stop. I already knew what was inside. And what wasn't. Instead, I went to the living room. Sat down. Waited. Not for them. For the moment. And eventually. It came. Romy walked in. Alone. She sat across from me. Too casually. Like this was just another conversation. "I've been thinking," she said. Of course she had. It might be easier if we handled the house sale sooner rather than later. There it was. Not moving anymore. Selling. I nodded slowly. That makes sense, I said. And watched her face. For a reaction. There it was. Relief. Small. But real. They thought I agreed. They thought I was following their timeline. Good. Then we should make sure everything is in order first, I added. Her expression held. But her eyes shifted. Of course, she said. Careful again. Always careful. I leaned back slightly. Relaxed. Unthreatening. Then asked. Do you have all the documents already? A simple question. But not an easy one. She paused. Just for a second. Then smiled. We're working on it, she said. Of course they were. I nodded. That's good, I said. Then stood up. Let me know when you're ready, I added. And walked away. No pressure. No confrontation. Just time. And space. For them to make their next move. Because now. They knew I was paying attention. And that changed everything. Not enough to stop them. But enough. To make them careful. And careful people. Make mistakes. I went upstairs. Closed the door. And sat down. The house was quiet again. But not the same quiet as before. This one had weight. Expectation. Because now. We were all waiting. They were waiting for me to leave. And I was waiting. For them to show me everything. Soon. Very soon. It happened faster than they expected. And slower than I did. The next day, they didn't wait. Not for dinner. Not for the right moment. They came to me. Together. I was in the living room. Sitting where I always sat. Same chair. Same posture. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. We think it's time to move forward, Romy said. No soft tone this time. No careful pacing. Just direct. I looked up at her. Then at Wade. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had already chosen his side. I thought we agreed to go through everything first, I said. Calm. Measured. We did, she replied quickly, and we have. Have. That word sat between us. I tilted my head slightly. All of it? I asked. A pause. Short. Barely noticeable. Yes, she said. Too fast. I nodded. Good, I said. Then gestured lightly. Show me. That was it. No accusation. No pressure. Just a request. Wade shifted. It's not all in one place yet, he said. Of course it wasn't. We're still organizing, he added. Organizing. I almost smiled. That's fine, I said. Then leaned back. We have time. That changed something. Not in the room. In them. Because time was the one thing they didn't want. We've already started looking at listings, Romy continued. Her voice tighter now. Buyers are interested. Buyers. So that was the next step. I nodded slowly. That's quick, I said. It's a good market, she replied. Of course it was. For them, I said. Quietly. Wade looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was trying to understand something he hadn't prepared for. Mom, he said, we're just trying to make this easier. Easier. I held his gaze. For who? I asked. Silence. This time longer. Romy stepped in. For everyone, she said. Always that answer. Always the same. I nodded. Then stood up. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just enough to shift the moment. Then let's make sure everything is clear, I said. They both watched me now. Carefully. Because something had changed. Not in what I was saying. but in how I was saying it. I'll need copies of everything, I continued. Property records, account access, authorization forms. Each word placed exactly where it needed to be. Romy's expression didn't move. But her hands did. She crossed her arms. A small change. But enough. We can provide that, she said. Future tense. Not present. I nodded. Good, I said. Then added. Because I'll need to review them before I sign anything. There it was. The line. Clear. Unavoidable. Wade exhaled slowly. You trust us, don't you? He asked. That question. Simple. But heavy. I looked at him. For a moment. I saw the boy he used to be. The one who held my hand. The one who trusted me. Then it passed. And I saw who he was now. I trust what I can see, I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. That was enough. Too much, maybe. Because now. They knew. Not everything. But enough. Romy straightened. We'll get the documents together, she said. Controlled again. Careful. Soon. I nodded. I'll be here, I replied. And that was the truth. Because I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. They left the room first. Not together this time. Romy walked ahead. Wade followed. A small distance between them. Not much. But new. I stayed where I was. Standing. Still. Listening to their footsteps fade. Then disappear. The house fell quiet again. But not the same quiet. This one had tension. Edges. Because now. We weren't pretending anymore. Not really. They knew I was asking questions. And I knew they didn't have answers ready. Not the right ones. I sat back down. Slowly. Let the moment settle. Because this was the beginning of the end. Not the confrontation. Not yet. But the shift. The point where control changes hands. And I could feel it. Clearly. They had rushed. They had pushed too soon. And now. They had to catch up. To a story? They thought they were writing. But weren't. I leaned back. Closed my eyes. And for the first time. I didn't think about what they would do next. I already knew. They would try to fix it. To cover it. To control it again. But it was too late. Because now. They weren't the only ones planning. And this time. I wasn't reacting. I was ready. Soon. Very soon. It happened 3 days later. They called me into the living room. Both of them. Again. But this time. They were prepared. Folders on the table. Papers neatly arranged. Pens placed beside them. Everything looked official. Organized. Convincing. Romy stood beside the table. Wade slightly behind her. Just like before. Only this time. They weren't asking. They were expecting. We've put everything together, Romy said. Her voice steady. Carefully practiced. I nodded. Walked over. Sat down. Slowly. Took my time. Because I wasn't the one in a hurry. Thank you, I said. I opened the first folder. Property summaries. Market estimates. Transfer outlines. Clean. Professional. And incomplete. I turned the page. Then another. I didn't rush. Didn't skim. I read. Every line. Every number. Every assumption they had built this on. And I could feel it. Their eyes on me. Waiting. For confusion. For hesitation. For surrender. I gave them none. After a few minutes, I closed the folder. Placed it gently on the table. Then looked up. This is very thorough, I said. Romy smiled. Relief. Too early. But, I added. That word. Small. But enough. The air shifted. I don't see the trust documents, I said. Silence. Not long. But real. Wade frowned slightly. What trust? He asked. I looked at him. Not cold. Not angry. Just clear. The one Noel set up. I said. Romy didn't move. But I saw it. That flicker. The moment something slipped. There is no trust, she said. Too quickly. Too certain. I reached into my bag. Took out the envelope. Placed it on the table. Between us. Same place they had put their papers. Then you should read this, I said. No emotion. No emphasis. Just fact. Wade hesitated. Then reached for it. Opened it. Read. And I watched. Not his words. His face. Confusion first. Then something else. Something heavier. Romy leaned in. Read over his shoulder. And for the first time. She didn't speak. Not immediately. The room went quiet. Not the quiet from before. This one had weight. Reality settling into it. That's not, she started. Then stopped. Because it was. Every line. Every condition. Clear. Legal. Final. Wade looked up at me. This says, he began. I know what it says, I replied. Calm. Still. It says the house was placed into a trust months ago, I continued. His hand tightened slightly on the paper. And it says, I added, that any attempt to remove me from it voids everything. Romy stepped back. Just half a step. But enough. That doesn't make sense, she said. Of course it didn't. Not to her. Because it wasn't part of her plan. It makes perfect sense, I said. Then leaned back. Relaxed. Like I had been the entire time. Your husband, she started. My husband, I said gently. Knew exactly what he was doing. That ended it. Not loudly. But completely. No argument. No raised voices. Just truth. Wade looked between us. Lost. For the first time. Why didn't you say anything, he asked. I looked at him. Really looked. Because now. I could answer honestly. You didn't ask, I said. And that was it. No accusation. No anger. Just fact. Romy crossed her arms. Tight. Controlled. But no longer confident. We were just trying to help, she said. I nodded. I know, I replied. And I did. Just not in the way she meant. I stood up. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just finished. You don't need to prepare anything else, I said. My voice steady. Clear. I'm not going anywhere. Silence. Heavy. Final. Wade didn't speak. Romy didn't argue. Because there was nothing left to argue with. The papers were still on the table. Theirs. And mine. Side by side. But only one of them mattered. I picked up my envelope. Slid it back into my bag. Then turned. And walked toward the stairs. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. Not empty. Not broken. Just different. Upstairs, I opened the bedroom door. The same room. The same air. The same life. Still mine. I stepped inside. Closed the door. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding on to something. I felt like I had let something go. Not the house. Not the memories. But the idea. That family always protects you. Sometimes. It doesn't. Sometimes. It shows you exactly where you stand. And that's enough. I sat down on the bed. Looked around the room. Everything was still here. Exactly where it had always been. Just like me. And this time. I wasn't temporary. I never was.